In the scorching heat of a military base where dreams go to die and heroes are born in silence, Sarah Martinez thought her biggest challenge would be proving she belonged among the men who questioned every order she gave. She had no idea that a single moment of instinct, a split-second decision while handling routine sandbags, would catch the attention of the most feared and respected general in the entire armed forces. What he saw in her that day would change everything she thought she knew about her limits, her purpose, and the deadly world that existed in the shadows of conventional warfare. Some soldiers spend their entire careers hoping for recognition. Sarah was about to discover that sometimes, being noticed by the right person is the most dangerous thing that can happen to you. Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she hefted another sandbag onto the growing wall. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Hood, turning the training ground into what felt like the surface of Mars. Around her, other soldiers worked in similar silence, the only sounds being grunts of effort and the occasional barked instruction from Sergeant Williams. She had been at this for 3 hours straight and her shoulders screamed in protest. But Sarah had learned long ago that complaining would only invite more scrutiny, more whispered comments about whether women really belonged in combat roles. At 24, she had already faced more doubt and skepticism than most soldiers twice her age. Every day was a test, every task an opportunity to prove herself or fail spectacularly. The sandbag fortification they were building was part of a routine training exercise, designed to simulate forward operating base construction. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would make it into recruitment videos, just honest, back-breaking work under a sun that seemed determined to melt them all into puddles of exhaustion. Sarah grabbed the next sandbag, noting automatically that it felt different from the others. Heavier, but not in the way that suggested more sand. The weight distribution was wrong, subtle but unmistakable to someone who had handled thousands of these bags over the past 2 years. Her mind, trained through countless hours of weapons identification and threat assessment, immediately began analyzing the discrepancy. She set the bag down carefully, not wanting to alarm anyone unnecessarily. Her fingers probed the canvas surface, feeling for anything that might explain the unusual weight. There, near the bottom corner, she felt it. A hard, rectangular shape that definitely was not sand. Her training kicked in immediately. Potential IED. Improvised explosive device. Even in training exercises, the possibility of real threats had to be considered seriously. Someone could have planted this as a test or worse, as an actual threat. Sarah's heart rate spiked, but her hands remained steady as she carefully examined the bag. She glanced around, noting the positions of her fellow soldiers. Martinez was 15 feet to her left, Johnson another 20 feet beyond that. If this thing detonated, the blast radius would catch at least 3 people, possibly more. The thought sent ice through her veins despite the crushing heat. Moving with deliberate care, Sarah began to clear the area. She caught Martinez's eye first, using subtle hand signals they had all learned in basic training. Potential threat. Move back. Clear the zone. Martinez, to his credit, did not hesitate or question. He began moving away while simultaneously alerting Johnson. Sarah continued her examination of the suspicious bag, her fingers tracing the outline of the hidden object. It was too regular to be debris, too deliberately placed to be accidental. Every instinct she had developed over 2 years of service was screaming danger. She was so focused on the potential threat that she almost missed the approaching footsteps. Heavy, measured, confident. The kind of walk that belonged to someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Sarah looked up to see a figure approaching through the heat shimmer, and her blood ran cold. General Marcus Thompson. Even from a distance, his presence was unmistakable. 3 stars gleaming on his collar, posture that could cut glass, and a reputation that preceded him into every room he entered. Thompson was not just any general. He was the kind of officer who appeared in classified briefings and congressional hearings, the kind whose name was whispered in the same breath as covert operations and impossible missions. What was he doing here, at a routine training exercise involving junior enlisted personnel? Sarah remained crouched by the suspicious sandbag, her mind racing. Should she complete her threat assessment? Should she stand and salute? Should she alert the general to the potential danger? Her training provided protocols for many situations, but what to do when a 3-star general approaches while you are examining a possible bomb had not been covered in any manual she had read. The general stopped 10 feet away, his eyes taking in the scene with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades evaluating tactical situations. He noted the cleared area, the alert positions of the other soldiers, and Sarah's careful stance beside the problematic sandbag. "Report," he said simply. One word, delivered with the kind of authority that expected immediate and complete compliance. Sarah rose to attention, her mind organizing the situation into the clear, concise format demanded by military communication. "Sir, I discovered an anomaly in one of the sandbags during fortification construction. Unknown object concealed within. Possibly explosive or surveillance device. I have cleared the immediate area and am conducting preliminary threat assessment." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly, but not with displeasure. If anything, Sarah detected a hint of approval in his expression. He approached the bag, moving with the confident ease of someone who had faced real threats in real combat zones. "Show me," he commanded. Sarah knelt beside the bag again, pointing to the area where she had detected the anomaly. "Here, sir. Rectangular object approximately 4 inches by 6 inches. Positioned to avoid detection during casual handling. Weight distribution suggests it is metallic or contains significant electronic components." The general crouched beside her, and Sarah was struck by how naturally he moved to her level. Many officers maintained physical distance as a matter of hierarchy, but Thompson seemed more interested in understanding the situation than asserting dominance. His fingers probed the bag with surprising gentleness, and Sarah realized that despite his administrative rank, this man had clearly spent time in the field. His touch was that of someone who had personally handled suspicious devices before, who understood the fine line between caution and paranoia. After a moment, Thompson smiled. It was not the expression Sarah had expected, and it sent a chill of uncertainty through her. "Outstanding work, Specialist Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine satisfaction. "Your threat identification and response protocols were textbook perfect. Your situational awareness and risk assessment demonstrate exactly the kind of thinking we need in advanced operations." Advanced operations. The phrase hung in the air like a question mark, loaded with implications Sarah could not quite grasp. Thompson stood, pulling something from his pocket. It was small, dark, and utterly unremarkable to anyone who did not know what to look for. But Sarah had seen enough military insignia to recognize something significant when she saw it. It was a badge, but unlike any she had encountered in standard military service. Black metal, about the size of a silver dollar, with an intricate design that seemed to shift and change as the light hit it. At the center was what appeared to be a flower, but rendered in such stylized fashion that it took Sarah a moment to identify it as a nightshade blossom. "Do you know what this is, Specialist?" Thompson asked, holding the badge so she could see it clearly. Sarah studied the object, her mind racing through every military symbol and insignia she had ever learned. Nothing matched. The craftsmanship was clearly military, but the design was unlike anything in standard armed forces heraldry. "No, sir," she admitted. "I am not familiar with that particular insignia." Thompson's smile widened slightly. "Most people are not, and that is precisely the point." He tucked the badge back into his pocket, but not before Sarah noticed that he handled it with the kind of reverence reserved for objects of significant importance. "The sandbag contained a training device," he continued, his tone returning to businesslike efficiency. "A test, if you will, designed to identify soldiers with particular aptitudes and instincts. Your response was being monitored and evaluated from the moment you first detected the anomaly." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that there had been no actual threat, but growing concern about what kind of test required the personal attention of a 3-star general. "Sir, may I ask what kind of aptitudes were being evaluated?" Thompson regarded her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "The kind that cannot be taught, Specialist Martinez. The kind that separate good soldiers from exceptional ones. The instincts that keep people alive in situations where standard protocol is insufficient." He gestured toward the cleared area where the other soldiers were now watching the exchange with obvious curiosity and concern. "You identified a threat that was not obvious. You followed proper protocols without hesitation. You maintained operational security while ensuring the safety of your unit. And you did all of this while under observation by a superior officer. which adds psychological pressure that derails many otherwise competent soldiers. Sarah felt a flush of pride, but also growing unease. Tests like this were not conducted for standard promotions or routine assignments. This felt like recruitment, and she had a suspicion that whatever she was being recruited for was not going to be found in any official military manual. "What happens now, sir?" she asked. Thompson glanced at his watch, then looked back at her with an expression that was both calculating and surprisingly kind. "Now, Specialist Martinez, you have a choice to make. You can continue with your current assignment, complete your enlistment, and pursue whatever civilian career appeals to you. You will have served honorably, and your country will be grateful for your service." He paused, letting the weight of the alternative hang unspoken in the scorching air. "Or," he continued, "you can learn what that badge represents. You can discover what lies beyond the conventional military structure you have known. You can find out what happens when soldiers with your particular combination of skills and instincts are given missions that officially do not exist." Sarah felt her mouth go dry. And it was not from the heat. Every instinct told her that this moment would define the rest of her life. That the choice she made in the next few minutes would determine not just her career, but her entire future. Around them, the normal sounds of military training continued. Soldiers calling out to each other. Equipment being moved, the distant sound of vehicles starting up. But Sarah felt as if she and the general existed in a bubble of silence, a space where life-altering decisions were made with the casual efficiency of ordering breakfast. "What kind of missions, sir?" she heard herself ask, though part of her mind was screaming that some questions were better left unasked. Thompson's eyes glinted with something that might have been approval or might have been predatory satisfaction. "The kind that ensure people like your fellow soldiers can sleep safely at night, Specialist. The kind that handle problems before they become headlines. The kind that require soldiers who can think beyond conventional parameters." He pulled out a business card, plain white with only a phone number printed in simple black text. No name, no organization, no identifying information of any kind. "If you are interested in learning more, call this number at exactly 2100 hours tonight. Ask for Nightshade. If you choose not to call, this conversation never happened, and your service record will reflect nothing more than exemplary performance during a routine training exercise." Sarah took the card, noting that the paper felt heavier than normal cardstock, and that the numbers seemed to be printed with some kind of specialized ink that caught the light oddly. "Sir, may I ask why you are offering this opportunity to me?" Thompson stepped back, his posture shifting subtly to indicate that the informal portion of their conversation was ending. "Because, Specialist Martinez, in 15 years of conducting similar evaluations, I have never seen someone handle a potential threat situation with such perfect balance of caution, efficiency, and tactical awareness. Because your instincts are precisely what we need for the challenges our country faces in an increasingly complex world." He glanced around the training area, then back at her. "And because that badge I showed you, it belonged to a soldier who started exactly where you are standing right now. She went on to complete missions that saved thousands of lives, in places and ways that will never be publicly acknowledged. When she retired last month, she specifically requested that we identify her replacement from among active duty personnel with similar psychological profiles and tactical aptitudes." Sarah felt the weight of implication in his words. Someone had worn that Nightshade badge before her. Someone had faced the same choice she was now facing, and had chosen the unknown path. "What happened to her?" Sarah asked quietly. Thompson's expression grew distant for a moment, as if he was remembering something both proud and painful. "She completed her service with distinction and retired to a very comfortable civilian life. But that is not the relevant question, Specialist Martinez." "What is the relevant question, sir?" "The relevant question is what will happen to the missions she can no longer complete. The relevant question is who will stand in the gap she has left behind. The relevant question is whether you have the courage to become someone most people will never know existed." With that, General Thompson stepped back and rendered a crisp salute. Sarah returned it automatically, her mind still reeling from the implications of everything she had just heard. "Carry on, Specialist," Thompson said, his voice returning to the formal tone of military command. "Complete your current assignment, and remember that some decisions cannot be unmade." He turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing beside the now harmless Sandbag with a business card in her hand, and a choice that would define the rest of her life. Around her, the training exercise continued as if nothing had happened, but Sarah knew that everything had changed. The card seemed to burn in her palm as she watched the general disappear into the heat shimmer. 2100 hours. Ask for Nightshade. A simple phone call that would either return her to the normal trajectory of military service or launch her into a world she could not even begin to imagine. As she returned to work mechanically lifting sandbags and building fortifications, Sarah Martinez found herself thinking about badges that officially did not exist, missions that were never acknowledged, and the kind of soldier who chose to walk in shadows so that others could live in the light. The Texas sun continued to beat down mercilessly, but Sarah no longer felt the heat. She was too busy contemplating a future that lay beyond anything she had ever considered possible. Sarah sat on the edge of her narrow military cot, staring at the plain white business card for the 100th time since General Thompson had handed it to her 12 hours ago. The fluorescent lights in the barracks cast harsh shadows across her face, and the constant background noise of soldiers settling in for the night provided a soundtrack of normalcy that felt increasingly distant from her current reality. 20:55 hours, 5 minutes until the appointed time. She had spent the entire day going through the motions of normal military life, but her mind had been elsewhere, turning over every word of her conversation with the general, analyzing every implication of the choice she now faced. Her fellow soldiers had noticed her distraction. Martinez had asked 3 times if she was feeling all right, and even Sergeant Williams had commented on her unusually quiet demeanor during evening chow. The card felt heavier than it should in her hands. Just a phone number printed on what appeared to be ordinary cardstock. But Sarah had examined it closely during her few moments of privacy, and she had discovered details that confirmed this was far from ordinary. The ink had a subtle iridescent quality that only became apparent under direct light. The paper, while appearing standard, had an unusual texture that suggested specialized manufacturing. Most telling of all, when she had tried to photograph it with her phone earlier, the camera had somehow failed to capture the numbers clearly, producing only a blurred image that was completely illegible. This was technology designed to prevent casual documentation or reproduction. Someone had gone to considerable expense to create something as simple as a business card that could not be easily shared or copied. The implications made her stomach churn with a mixture of excitement and dread. 25/7 hours. Sarah stood and walked to the payphone at the end of the barracks hallway. The old-fashioned device looked almost anachronistic in an age of smartphones and digital communication, but military installations often maintain such equipment for security reasons. Something told her that making this call on her personal phone would not be advisable. She inserted coins with hands that were steadier than she felt, then carefully dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Sarah was beginning to wonder if she had somehow misunderstood the instructions when a voice answered. Yes? The voice was female, professional, completely neutral. I was told to ask for Nightshade, Sarah said, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. There was a brief pause, then the sound of typing in the background. Authentication required. State your current location and the source of this number. Sarah took a deep breath. Fort Hood, Building 2847. The number was provided by General Thompson following a training evaluation. More typing, then a longer pause. Sarah could hear what sounded like multiple voices conferring in the background, though she could not make out the words. Stand by for transfer, the voice said finally. The line clicked, and after a moment a different voice came on. This one was male, older, with the kind of quiet authority that suggested extensive field experience. Specialist Martinez. I am Colonel Harrison. General Thompson has briefed me on your performance today and his subsequent conversation with you. I understand you are interested in learning more about expanded service opportunities. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, though her voice sounded uncertain even to herself. Before we proceed, I need to make something absolutely clear. This conversation is classified at levels that extend beyond standard military security protocols. Simply by continuing this call, you are accepting responsibility for maintaining operational security regarding information you may receive. Do you understand and accept this responsibility? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Once she said yes, there would be no going back to the simple uncertainty she had felt just moments before. She would be committed to learning things that might change her fundamentally. I understand and accept, sir. Excellent. Now, specialist, I am going to ask you a series of questions. Answer honestly and completely. Your responses will determine whether this conversation continues or ends immediately. First question. Why did you join the military? The question caught Sarah off guard. She had expected inquiries about her technical skills or physical capabilities, not something so personal and subjective. Sir, I joined because I wanted to serve something larger than myself. I wanted to make a difference in protecting people who could not protect themselves. Standard recruiting poster answer specialist. I asked why you joined, not why you thought you should join. Try again. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to consider the question more deeply. Why had she really enlisted? What had driven her to choose military service over the dozen other paths available to her after high school? Sir, I joined because I was tired of feeling helpless. I grew up in a neighborhood where bad things happened to good people, and the authorities could not, or would not, do anything meaningful about it. I wanted to learn how to be the person who could do something meaningful when others could not. Better. Second question. What did you think of General Thompson's offer? This question was easier, though no less revealing. Sir, it terrified me and excited me in equal measure. The general was offering an opportunity to do work that mattered in ways I had never considered, but he was also describing a level of responsibility and risk that goes far beyond anything in my current experience. And despite being terrified, you made the phone call. Why? Sarah paused, considering her answer carefully. She sensed that Colonel Harrison was evaluating not just what she said, but how she thought through her responses. Because, sir, being scared of something has never been a good reason not to do it, if that something is the right thing to do. And because I suspect that the kind of work General Thompson was describing is exactly what I have been preparing for without realizing it. Explain what you mean by that last statement. Sarah leaned against the wall beside the payphone, organizing her thoughts. Sir, every training exercise I have participated in, every skill I have developed, every situation I have been tested on, has been preparation for problems that are not straightforward. Combat scenarios where the enemy does not follow conventional tactics. Intelligence gathering where the information is deliberately obscured. Leadership challenges where the correct decision is not obvious, and the consequences of failure are severe. I think I have been unconsciously preparing for work that exists in gray areas rather than clear-cut situations. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, filled only by the faint sound of typing. Third question. Are you prepared to learn that much of what you believe about how the world works is incomplete or deliberately simplified? This question sent another chill through Sarah. It suggested that whatever organization Colonel Harrison represented operated with information and perspectives that were not available to conventional military personnel. Sir, I believe I am. I have already observed that the official version of events rarely captures the complete picture of any situation. I assume that the higher the level of responsibility, the more complex and nuanced the actual reality becomes. Indeed it does. Fourth question. Are you willing to accept that your service may require you to take actions that cannot be officially acknowledged or publicly defended? Sarah felt her mouth go dry. This was the heart of it, the fundamental question that would determine whether she was suited for whatever Colonel Harrison was describing. Actions that could not be officially acknowledged suggested operations that existed outside normal legal and political frameworks, work that might require moral flexibility, that could not be reconciled with conventional ethical standards. Sir, I would need to understand the specific nature and justification for such actions. I am willing to operate in situations where public acknowledgement is not possible, but I am not willing to participate in activities that I believe to be fundamentally wrong. What would constitute fundamentally wrong in your assessment? Sarah thought carefully about her answer. This felt like the most important question yet, the one that would determine whether she proceeded further into whatever world these people represented. Sir, actions that primarily serve personal gain rather than legitimate security interests, actions that cause unnecessary suffering, or that target innocent people, actions that undermine the principles and values that make our country worth protecting in the first place. And if you were ordered to take actions that appeared to conflict with those principles, but were told that the full context could not be revealed to you, Then I would expect clear assurance from leadership I trusted that the actions served legitimate purposes, and I would expect accountability mechanisms to exist even if they were not visible to me. Another long pause, more typing, more conferring voices in the background. Fifth and final question, Specialist Martinez. If you accept the opportunity General Thompson described, your life will change in ways you cannot currently anticipate. You will learn things that will affect how you see the world. You will develop capabilities that will set you apart from conventional soldiers. You will face situations that will test your judgment, your courage, and your character in ways that no training can fully prepare you for. Knowing this, are you still interested in proceeding? Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Everything rational in her mind was screaming caution. She was being offered entry into a world she did not understand, with risks she could not evaluate, for purposes that could not be fully explained. Any reasonable person would politely decline and return to the known challenges of conventional military service. But Sarah realized that she had never been particularly reasonable. She had enlisted in the military when her friends were choosing comfortable civilian careers. She had requested combat-related assignments when she could have selected safer specialties. She had consistently chosen the difficult path when easier options were available. More than that, she recognized something in Colonel Harrison's questions that resonated with her deepest motivations for military service. The suggestion that there were problems requiring solutions that could not be addressed through normal channels. The implication that there were threats to innocent people that could only be countered by individuals willing to operate outside conventional boundaries. Yes, sir. I am interested in proceeding. Report to Building 1247 at 0600 hours tomorrow morning. Bring only essential personal items. Your current assignment will be handled administratively. Tell no one where you are going or why. If anyone asks, you are attending a routine military education course at another installation. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror course through her veins. Sir, may I ask what will happen at Building 1247? You will begin learning what lies beyond the conventional military structure you have known, Specialist Martinez. You will discover what that Nightshade badge represents, and what it requires of those who earn the right to wear it, and you will find out whether you have what it takes to succeed in missions that officially do not exist. The line went dead. Sarah stood holding the silent phone for a long moment, processing what had just happened. In the space of a single phone conversation, she had committed herself to a path that would fundamentally alter her life. She had no clear understanding of where she was going or what she would be asked to do, but she had taken the first step into a world that existed in the shadows of normal military service. She returned the phone to its cradle and walked back to her cot, moving through the barracks with the strange feeling that she was already becoming invisible to her fellow soldiers. They continued their evening routines, talking about weekend plans and family visits, completely unaware that one of their number had just accepted an invitation into a parallel universe of military service. Sarah packed her essential items with mechanical efficiency, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. Building 1247. She had never heard of it, which suggested it was either new construction or a facility that did not appear on standard base maps. Either possibility reinforced the impression that she was entering territory that existed beyond normal military geography. As she settled into her cot for what might be her last night in conventional barracks housing, Sarah found herself thinking about the badge General Thompson had shown her. The Nightshade flower, rendered in black metal with craftsmanship that suggested significant expense and care. Someone had designed that insignia to represent something important, something that warranted the investment of resources and the attention of senior military leadership. Tomorrow, she would begin learning what that something was. Tomorrow, she would discover what kind of soldier she might become, given opportunities that most people would never know existed. Tomorrow, she would take the first concrete steps away from the known world and toward whatever lay beyond. But tonight, she was still Specialist Sarah Martinez, conventional soldier in a conventional military unit, surrounded by people living conventional military lives. Tonight, she could still pretend that her biggest challenges involved sandbags and training exercises, and proving herself to skeptical superiors. Tomorrow would bring a different reality, one that she had chosen but could not yet comprehend. As she lay in the darkness listening to the familiar sounds of a military barracks settling into nighttime quiet, Sarah Martinez allowed herself one last moment of belonging to the world she was about to leave behind. Then she began preparing mentally for whatever awaited her in Building 1247, in the shadowy realm where Nightshade badges were earned, and missions that officially did not exist were carried out by soldiers who had chosen to walk in darkness so that others could live in the light. Sarah stood before Building 1247 at exactly 0600 hours, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and her mind racing with anticipation and uncertainty. The structure looked utterly unremarkable from the outside, identical to dozens of other administrative buildings scattered across Fort Hood. Plain brick construction, standard military architecture, no identifying signs or numbers visible from the road. If she had not been given the specific building number, she would never have found it. The only unusual detail was the complete absence of windows on the ground floor, which gave the building a somehow secretive appearance that made Sarah's nerves tighten another notch. She approached the main entrance, noting that the door was constructed of metal far heavier than standard military building specifications required. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal a woman in military fatigues with no visible rank insignia. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested extensive field experience. Specialist Martinez, I presume. I am Agent Crawford. Please follow me. Agent Crawford led Sarah through a hallway that looked completely normal until they reached an elevator that definitely had not been visible from outside the building. The elevator descended for what felt like several stories, much deeper than should have been possible given the building's external appearance. When the doors opened, Sarah found herself in a facility that bore no resemblance to any military installation she had ever seen. The corridors were wider than standard construction, lined with smooth surfaces that appeared to be some kind of advanced composite material rather than ordinary concrete or drywall. The lighting was softer and more evenly distributed than conventional fluorescent fixtures, and the air circulation system operated so quietly that it was barely perceptible. This was clearly a facility designed with significant resources and attention to detail, built to standards that went far beyond normal military specifications. "Welcome to the Nightshade Assessment Center," Agent Crawford said as they walked. "Over the next 72 hours, you will undergo evaluations that will determine your suitability for advanced operational assignments. These assessments will test your physical capabilities, psychological resilience, intellectual capacity, and moral reasoning under extreme stress conditions." They passed several rooms with reinforced doors and small observation windows. Through one window, Sarah glimpsed what appeared to be a sophisticated combat simulation chamber. Through another, she saw banks of computer equipment that looked more advanced than anything she had encountered in conventional military service. "Agent Crawford, may I ask how many people are selected for this program?" Crawford glanced at her with an expression that might have been amusement. "An average of 12 individuals per year are invited to undergo assessment. Specialist Martinez. Of those 12, typically 3 to 4 demonstrate the necessary combination of capabilities and psychological profile to proceed to operational training." The numbers sent a chill through Sarah's stomach. She was competing not just for acceptance into an elite program, but for one of only 3 or 4 positions available annually across the entire military. The level of sectivity suggested that whatever this organization did, it required capabilities that were genuinely rare. They stopped at a door marked with nothing more than the number 7. Crawford opened it to reveal a sparse but comfortable room containing a single bed, a desk, a chair, and basic personal facilities. The walls were the same smooth composite material as the corridors, and Sarah noted the absence of windows or any external reference points. "This will be your quarters during assessment," Crawford explained. "Meals will be delivered at scheduled times. You will be collected for evaluation sessions according to a schedule that will be provided each morning. Any questions?" Sarah looked around the room, noting details that reinforced her impression of being in a highly secure facility. The door frame was constructed to tolerances that suggested it could be sealed completely. The ventilation system could be independently controlled. Even the bed was bolted to the floor. "Agent Crawford, what happens if I decide during the assessment that this program is not right for me?" Crawford's expression grew serious. "Then you will return to your previous assignment with a commendation letter and no further contact from our organization. Your security clearance will be adjusted to reflect exposure to classified information, but you will not be penalized for choosing not to proceed. And if I fail the assessment? The same outcome, specialist. We are looking for individuals with very specific psychological and capability profiles. There is no shame in not being suited for this particular type of work. Most soldiers, including many excellent ones, are not. Crawford handed Sarah a tablet computer that appeared to be a custom military model she had never seen before. Your schedule and general information are loaded on this device. Your first evaluation begins at 0800 hours. I suggest you use the intervening time to rest and mentally prepare yourself. After Crawford left, Sarah sat on the narrow bed and activated the tablet. The interface was clean and intuitive, but she immediately noticed that it had no network connectivity indicators, and no access to standard internet or military communication systems. This device was clearly isolated from any external networks, designed to provide information without allowing communication beyond the facility. The schedule was sparse but ominous. Physical assessment, psychological evaluation, tactical reasoning examination, ethical scenario analysis. Stress response measurement. The descriptions gave no detail about what each evaluation would involve, but the clinical language suggested scientific rigor that went beyond standard military testing. At the bottom of the schedule was a single line that made Sarah's heart race. Final determination interview with Colonel Harrison, 1400 hours, day 3. Colonel Harrison. The voice from last night's phone call. The man who had asked questions that seemed designed to probe the deepest foundations of her character and motivation. In less than 72 hours, she would face him in person and learn whether she had demonstrated whatever qualities this organization required. Sarah spent the remaining time before her first evaluation trying to mentally prepare for challenges she could not anticipate. She reviewed everything she knew about advanced military tactics, psychological resilience techniques, and ethical decision-making frameworks. But she also recognized that if this assessment was truly designed to identify rare capabilities, it would likely present situations that could not be addressed through standard preparation. At precisely 0800 hours, Agent Crawford returned to escort her to the first evaluation. They walked through corridors Sarah had not seen before, past rooms containing equipment and personnel that reinforced her impression of being in a facility devoted to activities far beyond conventional military training. The physical assessment took place in a gymnasium that would not have looked out of place at an Olympic training facility. Sarah was put through a series of tests that measured not just strength and endurance, but coordination, reaction time, spatial reasoning, and ability to maintain performance under various stress conditions. Some of the equipment was familiar from standard military fitness evaluations, but other devices were clearly custom-built for measuring capabilities she had never considered. The most challenging portion involved navigating an obstacle course while wearing gear that deliberately interfered with her vision, hearing, and balance. The exercise was designed to test her ability to adapt to sensory limitations while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Sarah found herself drawing on instincts and capabilities she had not known she possessed, finding ways to complete objectives using senses and reasoning processes she rarely relied on. The psychological evaluation was conducted by a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Peterson, a clinical psychologist with credentials that suggested extensive experience in military and intelligence applications. The session lasted 4 hours and covered everything from childhood experiences to hypothetical moral dilemmas. Dr. Peterson was particularly interested in Sarah's responses to scenarios involving conflicting loyalties and incomplete information. She presented situations where standard ethical frameworks provided unclear guidance, where good outcomes required morally ambiguous means, where protecting innocent people might require deceiving authorities. Specialist Martinez, Dr. Messias. Peterson said during one particularly challenging exchange, "Imagine you have information that could prevent a terrorist attack, but obtaining that information required methods that violated several constitutional protections. How do you evaluate the ethical implications of using such information?" Sarah considered the question carefully, recognizing that her answer would be evaluated not just for its content, but for the reasoning process that produced it. "Doctor, I would need to consider several factors: the certainty and specificity of the threat, the availability of alternative information sources, the precedent that using illegally obtained information might establish, the possibility of achieving the same protective outcome through legal means, even if those means were slower or more resource-intensive, and if time pressure prevented exploration of legal alternatives, then I would focus on minimizing harm while preserving as much constitutional integrity as possible. I might use the information to guide legally obtained intelligence gathering rather than acting on it directly. I might find ways to alert appropriate authorities without revealing the source of my knowledge. Peterson made notes that Sarah could not see, then posed another scenario. The session continued in this fashion for hours, each hypothetical situation more complex and morally ambiguous than the last. The tactical reasoning examination was conducted by a man who introduced himself as Major Williams, though his demeanor suggested field experience that went far beyond conventional military operations. He presented Sarah with intelligence scenarios that required her to make strategic decisions based on incomplete and sometimes contradictory information. The situations were unlike any she had encountered in standard military training. Instead of clear enemy forces with identifiable objectives, she was asked to analyze networks of relationships, economic pressures, political motivations, and cultural factors that might influence security threats. The problems required her to think systemically about complex situations where military force was only one of several possible intervention tools. Major Williams was particularly interested in her ability to identify patterns and connections that were not immediately obvious. He showed her intelligence reports, financial records, communication intercepts, and travel data, asking her to construct narratives that would explain how these disparate pieces of information might relate to potential security threats. Sarah found herself drawing on analytical capabilities she had developed through years of military training, but applying them in ways that felt almost investigative rather than purely tactical. She was thinking like a detective trying to understand criminal networks, like an economist analyzing market disruptions, like a sociologist studying community dynamics. The most challenging aspect was maintaining awareness of her own uncertainty and bias. Major Williams repeatedly emphasized that overconfidence in analytical conclusions could be more dangerous than admitting ignorance, that the ability to acknowledge the limitations of available information was crucial for operational success. By the end of the second day, Sarah was mentally and physically exhausted. The evaluations had pushed her beyond her previous understanding of her own capabilities, forcing her to think and perform in ways that stretched every skill she had developed over 2 years of military service. But she was also exhilarated. Despite the stress and uncertainty, she recognized that she was being challenged in ways that felt authentic and meaningful. These were not arbitrary tests designed to eliminate candidates, but sophisticated assessments intended to identify individuals with genuinely rare combinations of capabilities. The final day began with what Agent Crawford described as a comprehensive scenario exercise. Sarah was placed in a simulation chamber and presented with a complex operational situation that required her to integrate all the capabilities that had been individually assessed over the previous 2 days. The scenario involved a terrorist cell operating in an urban environment with civilian populations at risk and limited information about the group's objectives and timeline. Sarah was given access to various intelligence sources, communication systems, and potential response assets, then asked to develop and execute a strategy for neutralizing the threat while minimizing civilian casualties. The simulation was incredibly realistic, with computer-generated environments that responded dynamically to her decisions and virtual characters that behaved with sophisticated artificial intelligence. Sarah found herself making tactical decisions, ethical judgments, and strategic assessments in real time, with consequences that felt genuinely meaningful despite the simulated nature of the environment. The exercise lasted 6 hours and concluded with a debriefing session where her decisions were analyzed by a panel of evaluators. They questioned her reasoning, explored alternative approaches she might have considered, and probed her emotional and psychological responses to the stress of high-stakes decision-making. At 1400 hours, exactly as scheduled, Agent Crawford escorted Sarah to a conference room where Colonel Harrison was waiting. Seeing him in person, Sarah was struck by his presence, in a way that the phone conversation had not prepared her for. He appeared to be in his late 40s, with gray at his temples and the kind of quiet intensity that suggested extensive experience in high-pressure situations. "Please sit down, Specialist Martinez," he said, gesturing to a chair across from him at a small conference table. "I have reviewed the results of your assessments, and I would like to discuss your performance and potential fit with our organization." Sarah took the indicated seat, noting that Colonel Harrison's uniform bore no standard military insignia beyond his rank. Whatever organization he represented, it operated with symbols and identifiers that were not part of conventional military heraldry. "Sir, may I ask how I performed?" Colonel Harrison smiled slightly, an expression that seemed to contain both approval and something that might have been concern. "You performed exceptionally well, Specialist. In fact, your scores on several assessments were among the highest we have recorded in the 5-year history of this program." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but also growing apprehension about what such exceptional performance might mean for her future. However, Colonel Harrison continued, "High performance on our assessments is not the only factor we consider when making selection decisions. We also evaluate psychological resilience, adaptability to morally complex situations, and long-term potential for success in operational environments that most people cannot even imagine." He opened a file folder that contained what appeared to be detailed reports on every aspect of her assessment. "Your tactical reasoning capabilities are outstanding. Your physical performance exceeds requirements for the most demanding operational assignments. Your ethical reasoning demonstrates the kind of principled flexibility that is essential for our work." Colonel Harrison looked up from the file and met her eyes directly. "But I am concerned about your motivation, Specialist Martinez." The statement caught Sarah completely off guard. "Sir, I do not understand. I have demonstrated commitment to military service and to protecting innocent people from threats they cannot handle themselves." "Yes, you have. But our work requires more than commitment to abstract principles. It requires individuals who can maintain psychological stability and moral clarity while operating in situations where conventional ethical frameworks provide insufficient guidance. It requires people who can make peace with the fact that their most important contributions will never be publicly acknowledged or personally satisfying in conventional ways." Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with the intensity of someone making a decision with far-reaching consequences. Dr. Peterson noted that your responses to moral dilemma scenarios were highly sophisticated, but she also observed that you appeared to be seeking answers that would allow you to maintain a positive self-image while accomplishing necessary objectives. That kind of psychological need for moral certainty can become a liability in operational environments where moral certainty is a luxury we cannot afford. Sarah felt defensive, but she forced herself to consider his observation carefully. Was she indeed seeking ways to rationalize morally ambiguous actions rather than accepting that such actions might be necessary despite their moral costs? "Sir, I believe that maintaining ethical standards is essential for ensuring that our work serves legitimate purposes rather than simply expressing power or achieving institutional objectives." "I agree completely," Colonel Harrison said. "But I am concerned that your need for ethical certainty might prevent you from taking actions that are necessary for protecting innocent people, even when those actions cannot be reconciled with conventional moral frameworks." He pulled a photograph from the file and placed it on the table where Sarah could see it. The image showed a woman in military fatigues, wearing the Nightshade badge Sarah had seen General Thompson display. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, with the kind of alert, confident expression that suggested extensive field experience. "This is Captain Rebecca Chen, the soldier whose retirement created the position you are being considered for. Over the past 7 years, she completed 43 operational assignments in 16 different countries. Her work prevented or disrupted terrorist attacks that would have killed an estimated 12,000 innocent people." Sarah studied the photograph, trying to understand what Colonel Harrison was telling her about the woman who had worn the Nightshade badge before her. Captain Chen's final mission required her to infiltrate a human trafficking organization and gain the trust of individuals responsible for enslaving hundreds of women and children. She spent 8 months in that role, during which time she was forced to witness atrocities she could not prevent without compromising the larger mission. She ultimately succeeded in dismantling the entire network, but the psychological cost of maintaining her cover while surrounded by such suffering nearly destroyed her. Colonel Harrison returned the photograph to the file. Captain Chen understood that sometimes protecting innocent people requires accepting moral burdens that cannot be shared with others or resolved through conventional ethical frameworks. She made peace with the fact that her most important work would require her to become someone that ordinary ethical standards might condemn. Sarah felt a chill of understanding about what Colonel Harrison was really asking her. Was she prepared to accept moral responsibility for actions that might be necessary for protecting innocent people, even if those actions could not be publicly justified or personally reconciled with conventional ethical standards? Sir, are you asking whether I am willing to compromise my ethical principles for operational success? No, Specialist Martinez. I am asking whether you are willing to expand your understanding of what ethical behavior might require in extreme circumstances. I am asking whether you can maintain moral clarity while accepting that moral certainty is a luxury that people in our position cannot always afford. Colonel Harrison stood and walked to the small window that provided the room's only view of the outside world. The Nightshade badge represents soldiers who have chosen to bear moral burdens that most people should never have to carry. We take those burdens upon ourselves so that others can live with cleaner consciences and simpler choices. He turned back to face her. The question is whether you have the psychological strength and moral flexibility to join that tradition, or whether your need for ethical certainty would prevent you from taking necessary actions in critical situations. Sarah sat in silence for a long moment, considering everything Colonel Harrison had told her about the nature of the work she was being invited to join. The choice was even more profound than she had understood when General Thompson first showed her the Nightshade badge. She was being asked not just to serve her country in unconventional ways, but to accept moral responsibilities that would fundamentally change how she understood herself and her place in the world. Sir, I believe I am willing to accept those responsibilities, but I would need assurance that the actions I might be asked to take would genuinely serve to protect innocent people, rather than simply advancing institutional or political objectives. That assurance can be provided through operational briefings and command structure, Specialist Martinez. But ultimately, you would need to develop the judgment and confidence to make such determinations yourself, in situations where complete information is not available and consultation with superiors is not possible. He returned to his seat and met her eyes again. I am going to offer you acceptance into the Nightshade Operational Training Program, Specialist Martinez. The training will last 18 months, and will prepare you for the kind of missions Captain Chen completed successfully for 7 years. If you accept, you will leave conventional military service and become part of an organization that operates with different rules, different objectives, and different moral frameworks than anything you have known. Sarah felt her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and terror that was becoming familiar. What happens if I complete the training but decide that the operational realities are not what I expected? Then you will be reassigned to a conventional military specialty, with appropriate security clearances and commendations. No one who completes Nightshade training is ever penalized for choosing not to proceed to operational assignments. Colonel Harrison opened a drawer and removed a small wooden box. Inside, Sarah could see a Nightshade badge identical to the one General Thompson had shown her, nestled in dark velvet. This badge belonged to Captain Chen. She specifically requested that it be offered to her replacement, as a symbol of continuity and tradition. If you accept training placement, you will wear this badge during your preparation period. If you complete training and accept operational assignment, you will continue to wear it for the duration of your service with our organization. Sarah looked at the badge, thinking about the woman whose photograph she had just seen. The soldier who had spent 7 years walking in shadows so that others could live in the light. The weight of that tradition, the responsibility of continuing work that had protected thousands of innocent people, felt both inspiring and terrifying. Sir, I accept placement in the Nightshade training program. Colonel Harrison smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Sarah had seen from him. Welcome to the Nightshade Division, Specialist Martinez. Your training begins Monday morning. Agent Crawford will provide you with additional information and administrative details. He stood and extended his hand. Sarah rose and shook it, feeling the calluses and strength of someone who had clearly spent time in operational environments himself. One final piece of advice, Specialist, Colonel Harrison said as they prepared to leave the conference room. The work you are preparing for will change you in ways you cannot currently anticipate. You will develop capabilities you never imagined having. You will face situations that will test every aspect of your character. You will learn things about the world that most people are better off not knowing. He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression that contained both pride and something that might have been regret. but you will also have the opportunity to make a difference in ways that few people ever can. You will protect innocent people from threats they will never know existed. You will serve your country in ways that can never be publicly acknowledged, but that are absolutely essential for maintaining the freedom and security that others take for granted. As Sarah left Building 1247 that evening, carrying her duffel bag and the small wooden box containing Captain Chen's Nightshade badge, she realized that her life had changed completely in the space of 72 hours. She was no longer Specialist Sarah Martinez, conventional soldier in a conventional military unit. She was now a member of an organization that existed in the shadows of normal military service, preparing for missions that officially did not exist, but that were essential for protecting the world others lived in. The Nightshade badge felt heavier than its actual weight as she walked across the base toward her new quarters. It represented not just her acceptance into an elite program, but her commitment to becoming someone capable of bearing moral burdens that most people should never have to carry. As she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening Texas sky, Sarah Martinez began mentally preparing for a future that would require her to become someone she could not yet imagine, in service of protecting people who would never know her name or understand the sacrifices she would make on their behalf. The badge was just the beginning. The real test would be discovering what kind of person she would become when the training was complete and the operational missions began.